shooting at John Eden's studio, interview to follow.
Great, so we're rolling, and it's April 30th, 2008. We're in the studio and residence of John Eden, and this is in the course of making a profile about Jack Brogan and what he does. And I guess as Earl Morris would say, I don't know where to start, but let's start with, what's the first time you heard Jack Brogan's name?
Okay, let me answer it in a slightly different way, if I might. When in the 70s, I was going to graduate school in the San Fernando Valley, and I had a teacher, Peter Plagans, who is an author of Sunshine Muse, a history book really about California art. And two of the categories in the book, at the very back of the book, are Finnish fetish and light and space. And I learned about all the artists involved in both of those, I don't know if you'd call them movements, but people with those sensibilities within that. John McCracken being the one, Finnish fetish, and Bob Irwin and Terrell would be the light and space group. And so basically I grew up looking at that work, and I was always really amazed by it. And then, but I had no idea that really what I was looking at most of the time was Jack. I was looking at Jack doing the work for these artists, and he had a major hand in both of those movements. And I don't think that's really evident to a lot of people today. And like I told Jack, I said, if we were in Japan, Jack, you would be a national treasure. And he laughed it off because he's a very, humble guy, and he doesn't buy into that stuff. But really, it's true. I think that if we were in some place that valued the arts more than we do here, that he would be a national treasure, I think. So I think it's a no-brainer from my point of view, at least. And I don't want to diminish the artists that, because they had the vision, and he's the one that made it happen. And that's a real critical part, because a lot of people have good ideas, but they don't know how to make them realized, how to make them reality. And Jack is the guy. He knows so much about materials. He knows, in fact, I bet he's forgotten more about materials than I'll ever know in my whole life. And so that's how I know about Jack. But if you want to know how I recently bumped into Jack, I can tell you another story.
Please.
You want to tell you another story?
Please.
You want to hear? Okay. I've been friends with Jack's wife, Edith, for a long time. Both abstract painters. We go back a long ways into the 70s too. And she was married to Lucius Hudson, and I knew Lucius because he made my stretcher bars, and so I got to know Edith that way. And then when Lucius passed away, I just continued my friendship with Edith. Off and on, and then she married Jack, and so I met Jack at various times in the past, but he was a sculptor and I was a painter, and it was kind of, I just didn't get to know him really well. And then because we both have Southern backgrounds, I was kind of attracted to his personality. It reminded me of people in my family that I was comfortable with as a child. And so I think we got to be good friends in that way. And then I would be working on a piece. I did cigar boxes, and so I started working into the three-dimensional, and Jack would say, well, you should do it this way, and I would come to him and I'd say, these brass hinges are really too gaudy. They're going to really kill the piece? And what can I do to like just take that edge off and just kind of push him back into the background? And it was a lacquered box, and so he gave me a special solution to soak the hinges in that turned them black. And so if I would have painted them, it would have scratched off, because when you move a hinge, it rubs off, and you know, that's a real problem. But Jack knew how to do it so that it's going to be forever the way I wanted it to be. And so that was the first job that I did with Jack. He just kind of helped me out. He told me what to do, and I did it myself. And then it just kind of built from that point on. And as we were going along, my friendship with him, I think, got, you know, deeper, and really enjoy him, you know, as a personal friend, and also as a mentor in materials.
I'd like to go back a bit to the perception of the conceptual artist and the person of Jack who executes or has a role in the execution of the piece. And I'm curious, people on looking at your work, has anyone ever said, you know, who actually is there a mechanic involved? You know, is that discussion ever come up?
Not normally. I think that, but what I like to be very open about the fact that Jack's a part of my sculptural pieces, and I don't try to keep that secret. I think a lot of people try to minimize, I don't want to mention any names, but they minimize his involvement, and that's understandable, because I think from a business point of view, you diminish something when you demystify yourself as the artist, and so it's a natural thing, but I'd kind of like to stay away from that. I think that I don't have a problem with giving Jack credit where credit's due, because I think there's plenty to do on my side of the coming up with an interesting idea, and and working with them to really kind of realize a piece is great.
And now, currently, I believe that you have one or more projects that you're collaborating with Jack on.
We probably have about 5 going in one state or another, and they don't always come to completion in the order that I've thought of them in. There's some that have they're just. At one time, I wanted to do a large-scale piece of on the honeycombed aluminum panels, and then paint and blow raw pigment on those panels, and but what happened was we got into just doing a small piece to see how it would look and how feasible it would be to do it, and then it just got to the point where it was a good idea, but it's just not going to be realized in the way that I wanted it to be, and it was just, you had to move on. So I'm working on other pieces with Jack, and I've done the cups and the bells with Jack, and then I have another piece that I'm about halfway through now, where it's a sphere. It's a stainless steel sphere that's going to have a lip on one side that's going to make it look like a keyhole shape if you're looking at it face on, and that's the piece that I'm working on right now.
Yeah, the other thing that I talked with Jack about, and Jack talked with me about to some extent, is You know, he's had this long-term working relationship with Robert Irwin, who was kind of his entree to the arts scene in Venice. Jack, as you may or may not know, came out here from Tennessee and opened up a little shop in West Hollywood repairing antiques, and then he started making things, you know, and then he had the fire, and then he moved to Lincoln Avenue in Venice, and he was doing something, and he had been helping artists with acrylic pieces and casting and being a reference. And somehow Robert Irwin got in touch with him, because he had this idea, and looked around and got Jack to fabricate this prism. So Jack talks about this whole cool school scene in Venice in the mid-late 60s and 70s. Were you around that at all?
Well, I was just, let's see, in the late 60s, I was in the service and I was out of action. And, but after that, I went to school in San Francisco, to undergraduate school, the San Francisco Art Institute, and so I was in California, but I came back down here in '73. And that's when I kind of planted back into the art scene here. And so I knew these people because of Sunshine Muse, Peter Plagans, and taking classes with Peter and kind of finding out about all of this. And he would, you know, during the week, he would say, you know, there's going to be this show, everybody should go check it out. It's pretty interesting. And he was writing for Art Week. So, not Art Week, Art Forum. That's a real faux pas. Sorry about that, Peter. But and he was writing for Art Forum and doing reviews of all the shows in California, and so he really knew what was happening. And so I kind of learned through Peter about Ferris and everything that had gone before, that I wasn't here during that time, but I learned about it in the mid-'70s and just kind of picked it up at that point. And but those people were around, and they were people, the unapproachables, you know, that you would see at an opening, that and you were like really young and ridiculous and
and cool for this fool.
Yeah, exactly. And so you would just see them and you'd know who they were and you'd respect them, but that was about it, you know. So I've never known Bob Irwin personally until bumping into him at Jack's, and I've only been around him several times, and I couldn't say that I'm even a friend. Just kind of, I've been acquainted with him. So he's kind of elusive, you know. He just comes and goes. He comes and looks and goes.
Yeah, I talked with Jack this morning, as he said he was expecting him. And he said he's in town. He's got a bunch of appointments, so he doesn't know when he's going to show up. So I'm going to check in with him this afternoon.
Oh.
My goal is just, I'd like to get his reactions to the color panels. And
That'd be great.
see how it's kind of the next step in that project. And, so we'll work it out. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you were waiting for me to ask?
I was just thinking about that. It'd be really nice. I don't know if this is ever going to go down into the finished product, but I just have this idea that it would be really nice that if all of the dealers could get together, and because Jack's made a lot of those dealers, wealthy over the years, it'd be really nice if they all got together and bought Jack a retirement home somewhere where he could retire. But then again, he's never going to retire because he loves what he's doing, and there's no way that he's going to stop. He's just he just loves to do what he does. And I'm surprised that he takes off Saturday and Sunday sometimes, because he just is so,
Throw his Edith.
yeah. So I mean, that's the funny part of Jack. He's just like, he loves what he does. And it's great. It's inspiring.
Well, there is a part two to this, and what I'd like to do is set up a very rough cut that I have of material that I've shot and semi-organized. And I'd like to look at it, and I'd like to
Do additional footage, yeah,
shoot a
or
reaction
comments.
to
Okay.
that. I was thinking, if you're comfortable, I'd like to go up in the studio and just shoot it in a little different environment.
Okay.
I've got my Mac here, and it'll be a quick time. Will be.
Oh, you mean you want to do it today?
Yeah, if you.
Oh, okay.
Times, it's
Sure.
4 minutes.
Okay.
So, yeah, to do that. There is much that I would like to ask you about yourself, but I promised myself that I'm going to keep this on target.
Yeah.
About
You're going to have War and Peace as it is, I'm afraid.
yeah. Well, that's not to get windy, but that's kind of the joy of documenting, is you gather and you really don't know what you're going to get until
Right.
you get there. Nor does the subject. So. Okay, well, thank you very much,
Sure.
John, for sharing and being open with me. Okay, great.